Hello, dear friends, my lovely audiences, my dear audiences, ladies and gentlemen. You're welcome to the East-West Show Jack Chow is hosting with G&E TV. For a long time before the election, we've been sitting together with my dear friend, Mr. Bruce Whitaker, Mayor of Fullerton, for several times. We're trying to make a point. Point was made, I believe, but it was not made enough. So speaking of the past election, of course, the election was over, but the politics remains. The problem remains, the issue remains. That's why we named the show Post-Election Politics. Are still there. So with that, let's give my friend Bruce Whitaker a warm welcome to the show, please.
Thank you, Jack. It's always a pleasure to be here with you.
Good. And your lovely wife, Linda, if you happen to be watching, my regard to you too, because you and I and Bruce, everybody, including my team, we put up a wonderful work, we did a wonderful job, and to you we appreciate, and here's our gratitude, right, also.
And my heartfelt thanks for all your support and the ability to get in front of your audience and talk about some of these issues. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. We're like-minded people, right? We're like-minded people. This morning I was writing a poem. I said, please inject a dose of gratitude to your blood and never worry about overdosing. Because today people do have the problem that they don't look back, they don't think where they are, they don't give any gratitude whatsoever to what they are, where they are. So thank you very much for
So you are a poet as well, right?
Oh,
I used to write poetry when I was younger.
I do sketch a little bit.
Yeah, that's good. That's very good.
Yes, Mr. Whitaker was running for the Senate House of 29th District for that seat. At that, Mr. Josh Newman, who was out now, was in power, created a bunch of crazy bills, including the tax bill, which is in question. Is our big problem. I was a little while ago talking to Mr. Whitaker that winning or losing is one issue, is one thing, but to be unrelentingly pushing ahead, to have the guts to step forward, to do what's right for California is the other. And my friend, Mayor Whitaker of Fullerton, is that kind of man. He is really my cup of tea. Once again, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Jack.
Okay.
And you're right about the politics remain. I mean, people come and go, elected officials come and go, but it's the policies that we adopt to govern our activities here in the state. That's what we all deal with, and we feel the effects of those, whether they're good ideas or whether they're not so good ideas.
Exactly. Yeah. To me, election is like a tide. It comes on and off, right? It ebbs away, it ebbs in whatsoever, and it's all the time. It is the day-to-day life that remains. The same thing. I'm still Jack, right? You still call me Jack, the same thing. I still pay the extra 63 cents of gasoline tax, and my registration still bear the extra $175 per year, of which, by the way, my 3 cars, I just paid off. Big thing to do, right? But, you know, accumulation, day by day, so that's a big chunk of money, right? So, now, that we talk about a little later, because this is exactly what we're talking about today. But first, I would like to check about your take about being part of the candidate. I mean, being a candidate of part of the election, past election, please. How do you feel?
Well, I appreciate that it was a fairly clean election, and really that all sides kept it above board pretty much. Josh Newman he and his backers spent over $8 million to save his seat, and it didn't happen, which we always felt that would be the case.
And so in other words, the money is not always the case, right?
It isn't. And in fact, I wouldn't have run if I thought it was just the money. We put up a spirited fight. My wife Linda worked very hard. I worked hard. A lot of our supporters did. but we just got outgunned. And part of it was money. I'll never say it's all money. My opportunity to get in front of as many people in the district was greatly appreciated, but in retrospect, I would have had to have started a little bit earlier, I think. I'm not trying to make excuses, but it's a very large district. And at least I provided an alternative for voters. I know a lot of friends are out there saying, hey, I really appreciated that you were on the ballot. I could feel good about voting for someone. So that's part of it as well. But
and also, I especially myself, I feel that I am very grateful for that we have a candidate like you yourself who has the concept in lots of areas that meets the grassroots need. And also your call at a moment of difficulties, at a moment of hardship, such as in the case of Kelly Thomas of year 2012. By the way, my dear friend, if you heard the name of Kelly Thomas for the first time, I owe you a little story. Year of 2012, July the 5th in the evening, in the city of Fullerton, where the city nearby the city center, there is a guy whose name was Kelly Thomas, been 25 years known as a lunatic. By the way, a quote from the LA Times called him the landmark person, a landmark of Fullerton. Was known to everybody, including known to the police officers, that his lunaticness, right? So he was beaten to death by 6 fully armed, head-to-toe police officers. And while through going in and out, whatever, the court, and as a conclusion, those 6 were let free, right? Mr. Whitaker, as council member of Fullerton at that time, was the only one calls for justice, just being at that time, at least we should let the record go public. The record being the camera, right? The camera, the conversation, the recording, or so on and so forth, right? Let that go public. He was the only one out of the 5, all the 5, because only 1 against 5. It is a dangerous situation. That's why lots of people ask him, Mr. Whitaker or Bruce, are you afraid that you're running a re-election now? So you might lose your re-election. You're going against a dead wall or something. Well, he didn't care. He did go on, and he succeeded in one way that the public did go out. I mean, the information did go out, the record did go out. There's only one way, but yes, poor Don Thomas died of nothing, and those officers still running a free man like you and me, all right? So that is the type of man, that is the type of a Gus. I will bow, I will salute, I will chase forever in the rest of my life. That is my word, mark it, and next time you run, I'm still in it.
Well, thank you, Jack. And it has been a long journey since the Kelly Thomas thing. We're nearing the 7-year anniversary right now, and still dealing with some of the issues, some of the legal issues at the council level. But it still remains. There are people who feel a memorial should be established at that site, and yet there are people on the other side who are really strongly against that. So just like you said, the issues go forward. We still continue the fight. And it's important that we remember and that we learn from these. That was my point on getting audio and video records out for the people so they could judge for themselves. We deserve that. We deserve the right to do that.
And by the way, at the Kelly Thomas funeral, Mr. and Mrs. Whitaker in black were the only officials, city officials at the funeral, right? And lots of people again worry that why you do that. You're exposing yourself to the public. You're exactly going the contrary of whatever the majority is, right? So he didn't care, and I adore that. I really, really want to say something that you guys, if you missed to pick somebody like that to represent you, that's really, really a big mistake. Anyway, we'll still have another 2 years to go, right? Okay. So next time when you run, I do recommend we start early, and we got a better job to do, and we can do better. I believe that, right? I normally do not take a stand. I no position at all. As a newsman, I'm the neutral man forever. However, when things like black and white, such as Kelly Thomas case, whoever, a human being, has the gut to do what he did, must be a good guy. I know nothing of higher level or lower level. In my poor word, with my limited English vocabulary, I say him a good guy. That's it.
Thank you, Jack. I am grateful for people who pay attention. And I appreciate that you pay attention and you take a lesson from these issues, from what's happening in our region even. But in particular in the 29th Senate District, how much we are all affected by the same issues, whether something like that has occurred in our city or not yet. It will happen. Those willing, and we do need people willing to stand up and argue the other side.
Thank you very much. And by the way, the case whereby Mr. Whitaker stood strongly for was settled, quote unquote settled, with a huge amount of money from the city, from the taxpayers' pocket, right? So if the officers would do the right things, why pay off, right? So that's the thing. That proven, once again, this brave man did the right thing to fight, and he fought successfully, all right? Now, my dear friends, in the retrospect of the election, we talked this much to make a point, the point being that Mr. Whitaker did the right thing by stands up and step forward to run. Winning or losing, not the issue. The issue is that U.S. politics remains, right? Election comes and goes, politics remains. It is our day-to-day life, it is day in, day out, all these issues that count. When we come back, we will continue with those issues that left behind. I believe District 29 is going to be a very problematic district. Not only is large, not only is a lot of leftovers, and we believe there are issues, new issues coming out. So stay with us. We'll be right back, please. Hello, dear friends, my lovely audience, my dear fellow Californians. Welcome back to the show, Jack Chow on the East West Show with the GNE TV. Today with me is my big friend, Mr. Bruce Whitaker, mayor of Fullerton City, a beautiful city with a lot of story to talk about. And he was the candidate for the past election for California Senate for the 29th District for that house. Yes, today we are doing a discussion about the politics, and I call it a post-election politics. So once again, sir, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Good, all right. So we know that Mr. Josh Newman, the former senator of the 29th District, is gone, right? So what's your take on that, starting from the signature to all the way he is out?
Well, I felt from the beginning that when Josh Newman became a big backer of all these taxes and they were coming at us, the supermajority was, that he had been a fraud in the way that he had run his election to narrowly win election the last cycle. And he had portrayed that he would be moderate, that he would be a different kind of Democrat, that he'd be responsive to the people. And as soon as he got in there, as soon as he was elected, it was clear that wasn't the case.
Extreme.
That he was another appendage of Sacramento, and he was doing the bidding of the governor and the administration that wanted to pump up their revenues by taxing and increasing fees and putting other burdens on us. So all of his voting records showed that, and most appropriately, he was removed. I mean, the voters understood that, and they made that removal. So we have the beginning now of progress, I think. And in fact, what else is happening is a measure has qualified for the ballot here in November, which would repeal the gas taxes, which that would be a wonderful thing. That's $5.2 billion a year. And it includes those registration fees. It includes the gas increase.
Slow down a little bit. We'll talk about that, repealing of the tax a little later. Where we want to learn something from the recalling, right? Okay.
Right.
Number one, you mentioned $8 million spent. So that gives us an indication that money is not the only thing. Right. Okay. And number two, I wanted to point out, had the audience, I mean the voters, the constituents, known exactly what the bill was about, would they vote yes to let it pass?
You mean the tax bill?
Had they known that, I'm paying 63 cents more and $175 more if I say yes. Had the constituents known that, would they still vote yes?
Well, had they had an opportunity to vote on it at all, because of the supermajority, they never got that opportunity. And in the state, we become accustomed to the idea of we get to vote on taxes. However, that supermajority that happened after the last cycle, it negated that. And if they have a 2/3 majority in both houses, the Assembly and the Senate and the governor, it passes without going to the voters. So that's why this recall was also, I think, a reaction to voters saying, wait a minute, we don't know, we didn't plan a supermajority, it just happened. And if you're going to do that and take away our right to vote on taxes, we want to restore that right.
And he voted the decisive vote himself.
He internally voted for all of us, and he voted in the wrong direction.
I see. All right, good. And that is second point we want to learn, right? And then we want to learn to understand a little bit to my audience. Here's a piece of education. Well, we all want to live to learn, right? So at what kind of numbers can one be recalled?
Well, generally, depending on the office, it takes qualifying signatures to qualify a recall for the ballot. Most of the time, it's in the 12 to 15% range. So about 15% of all the votes that were recorded in the last gubernatorial or presidential election usually is what qualifies a recall and puts it on the ballot so the voters can have that decision of a thumbs up or a thumbs down on an elected official.
And it looks that it went through two steps. Step number one, to qualify to put it on November ballot to let him out. And step number two, we went further. The signature went further to surpass certain level of by certain, like say, 10 or 20% to directly have him recalled from the office, like what happened now.
Well, that actually is, that's more like a referendum that recalls a law or an action. But for an elected official, it was the signatures that qualified it for the ballot, and then it was the ballot we just voted on where we had the two-part question, yes or no to recall Josh Newman, and if so, choose your replacement on the other side of the ballot. But that was actually the action to remove him. And just qualifying, just getting those signatures and putting it forward doesn't really have that effect. It takes the vote. So just to put that question on a ballot to bring a spontaneous election, because otherwise he wouldn't have been running again until 2020. So this was a performance review forced by the voters, by those signatures to say, okay, we're going to put you up for a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and the voters chose to remove him.
I see. In other words, what that said though, 2 years later, can he run again?
He could, yes.
He could. All right, okay.
I don't know who's going to want to spend $8 million on him to do that.
I know. Yeah. Third point, we learned that sometimes the voters' voices, the voters' signatures, really do count.
They did.
In this very case, though, the constituent's signature weighs more than $8 million in this case. Am I right?
Yes.
So the $8 million didn't save the situation. Still, what prevailed was the signature by the voters. Am I right?
Yeah, it required the voters to say, we want to pull him before us for this review, this performance review.
All right, okay.
And that wasn't paid for other than, signature gathering.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for bringing us up with this education. And we all know roughly, in a blurred way, what is going on, though. To precisely get to the point, though, we need to get some constant education like what you just explained. Okay, now he is totally out of the U.S. Senate House.
Right.
Am I right?
He is. He's
He's
back,
totally out.
regular citizen again.
He's a
Yes.
back home regular citizen, husband, whatsoever.
Whatever.
Right. Oh, I see. I see. And the legacy, which is the tax itself,
Yep.
we're still paying, right?
Right. It's
in
still in effect.
November, we will be voting. In other words, thumbs up or down for the tax to survive.
Right.
Am I right?
The action will be to repeal that measure that was passed by the legislature. It was never passed by the voters. But to repeal that, so you'll want a yes vote to say remove this tax. And if we do that, and I believe we will, there are elements in this measure which are even better in a way because they restore the right of voters in every case, whether there's a supermajority or not, to be able to vote on taxes. So this measure is beyond just the money side of getting this money back. It actually creates voter rights going forward, improved rights.
I recall during the campaign, there was one interview that we were doing here. You mentioned about the literature of the text of the bill to describe it. So there are lots of games being played that way. So are we sure, can we guarantee no more games are being played in the coming November election to appeal the text?
No, the Attorney General and to some extent Secretary of State, they'll play games. They still are part of the current majority that really wanted this revenue, that wants to hang on to this revenue. So there will be efforts to confuse voters.
Yes.
But we have to look at this and say we have to trust those who actually engineered the recall for Josh Newman to follow through and to try to remove that tax, that basket of taxes basically, and get us back to where we were before. That's what the
What if
goal
it
is.
says, shall we not remove the tax?
Yeah.
So lots of voters will be confused to vote yes or no. Shall we not remove the gasoline tax and the registration fees? Something like that, right?
Right.
So to get to the point though, how are we supposed to make the constituents, make the voters aware of the fact that games could be played?
I think most voters need to be educated on the fact that yes, the language of a measure itself could be convoluted. But then you look, which is also listed on the ballot, is who supports the measure and who opposes the measure. And it doesn't take very long for people to figure out who the good guys and who the bad guys are on that. So if you're looking for Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association or you're looking for other legitimate groups that want lower taxes, look for them on there, whether they oppose or support the measure. And then if you look for support, often you'll find public employee unions and people who benefit from those tax increases. So you've got to look beyond just the measure language itself and look at who's backing it. Now that can be a little misleading sometimes too, but I think it'll be very much a black and white decision on this one. It'll
Very
be
good.
clear.
All right, my dear friends, let's take a short moment now. I'm not done yet. I'm still worried. I have a lot of worry about this case because I myself been cheated about one time. I voted wrongly against myself. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Hello, dear friends, my lovely audience, ladies and gentlemen, my dear fellow Californians. Welcome back to the show. Jack Chow having a good time with the interview of my good friend, Mr. Whitaker, Bruce Whitaker, Mayor of Fullerton, a wonderful human being. I call him a fighter for justice. Back to the show, sir. You're welcome.
Well, thank you. And on behalf of Fullerton, we're happy to have Josh Newman out of office. He lives in Fullerton currently. So we're pleased with the current state of things and the fact that now we have a chance to repeal those taxes.
All right. Finally, talking about the repealing of the tax, though, in the coming November, my worry, like I stated already, was that could they still play games with the description of the bill itself, right? What if they say, should we not remove the tax or something like that kind of thing? That said, my question, a bigger question, would be that why somebody like the Attorney General, like whoever, they're all the elected officials that we handpick to represent us, right? Yep. Why people who we pick to represent would turn their back to cheat us? I'm lost.
Well, some people think that's what politics is about, is being able to outsmart people and fool people and to win regardless. And some people, even voters, they appreciate that sort of guile, that kind of ability of people to pull the wool over others' eyes. I've never come from that side of the equation. I've always thought that government needs to be transparent, needs to be honest, and lay things out very clearly and make it comprehensible. So those are 2 points of view on how to govern. And unfortunately, right now, the majority party that controls things, they don't have much in the way of what I would consider ethical restraints. Mm-hmm. And so it requires a countervailing force, whether it be the citizens or the other party, the other major opposing party, to shine a light on that and just say, no, here's what's going on. Right. So that's our burden.
In other words, we need some kind of challenge up there amongst themselves.
Yep.
Right?
And we need pressure on people to say, well, no, we're not buying it. Let's dig a little bit deeper. And as I mentioned, our friends at Howard Jarvis Association is one such organization, but there are others. There are other think tanks who will pay attention to a lot of the details and to help do what they can to elucidate the public.
Okay, all right, good. Let's hope they are not cheating us. Let's hope they will take this coming November as an exception, stop cheating. So in that case, okay, suppose that will happen. Right.
Right.
What do you want to call the audience to do in order to get rid of the tax? Mm-hmm. If you hate, my dear audience, if you really hate paying the extra 63 cents and the $175 per year for registration, you really want to listen to that. The coming November is so decisive that we want to do something right to ourselves. So what would you want to advise our audiences, please?
Well, I would advise the audience that the administration in Sacramento has been cheering that they have a great surplus this year. They have an over $10 billion surplus. Mm-hmm. Well, part of that surplus has been built on these tax increases, these recent tax increases that they rammed at us.
Oh, they're proud of it.
And what it's showing you is that tax was not necessary, right? So if we can repeal, we get some of that back, we reduce that surplus. Now going forward, what they're counting on these taxes was to pay for pension liability. So what's going to happen, it's going to force some reform and some reorganization going forward to be able to meet whatever requirements are going to be there.
All right, okay.
But this is a big part of reducing that surplus. And the question is, do they know better how to spend our money, or do we know better how to spend our money on our own behalf? And it's that fundamental question. And if other people think the way that I do, and I suspect you do, we know best where our investments can go. And no, we really don't need the state as a proxy to spend our money for us. We'll do it ourselves. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I would bet that you are making a very, very huge point that when the way they spend California money is totally different than what we do when we spend our money.
Oh,
because our money is always limited, no matter how much you're making, right? Their money is unlimited. Whenever they need money, they raise tax. Whenever they raise money, they need tax. We're their banks, right? Because they stick their hands into our pocket, take money out, and they accumulate themselves, proudly claiming the credit. So, oh yeah, we're no longer in red, we're running black now, such as Jim Brown. Look at the smile on his face, right? So they proudly declare the victory about getting more tax money out of the taxpayers' pocket, and yet they misallocate the money, they squander the money, using the money for infrastructure to pay the pension dues whatsoever, right? So how are we going to make sure this time, by all means, you are no longer getting this 63 cents extra and $175 extra?
Well, one way we've done it is just by what just occurred, the fact that a sitting state senator can be recalled, can be spontaneously recalled over an important issue like taxation. Now, all the other senators, the other 39, see that lesson. They take that lesson. The 80 assembly members see that. And if they, through their own action, bring that action against them, a recall action, that they too can be removed from office. So every once in a while to make an example of someone is an important thing.
That may deter them, right? Okay.
So there is a deterrence effect to that. But it also means that voters have to wise up a little bit more and understand what's happening. That here we're getting taxes raised on us at a time when we're in another year of growth here, and it wasn't necessary to raise these taxes. They were just striking at an opportune moment when they had the numbers to be able to do it without having to put it before the voters because of that supermajority. So the other lesson we need to take from this is to avoid supermajorities, and that means creating a little more balance between the two major
parties. So now that they can go back, say, hey, let's do the supermajority game, it exactly has to go November by ballot, right?
Right.
Yep. So, in other words, we can vote now. Once again, we can exercise our right of democracy to vote no on that tax.
Yep.
To let it go.
Correct.
Well, in other words, by next year, I can expect some extra money.
It would be nice to roll that back because that's every year and it grows. They had an inflation adjustment as well. It was going to increase over time too. So we need to nip this one in the bud. We're still currently paying. Well, you were talking about, well, we're on a 4th of July holiday right now and people are paying extra right now to go on vacations with their families. We need to get it back where we're more in line with the other states.
Okay, very good. So I believe that the legacy that Mr. Josh Newman has left has not only limited in the tax, though. What else are needed to be pointed out before it's too late?
I think it's important to select elected officials who come from us, not someone. Josh Newman was a bit of a carpetbagger. He just recently relocated to Fullerton area. And I think it's important to look for people with deep roots in the community and maybe a record that people can refer to. He had never held elective office before. So I think it is important for voters to look and say, what's our best bet? You never know what someone's going to do until they get that power. So you need to select candidates and replacement candidates or new elected officials based on some kind of a track record. And I know voters get frustrated with incumbents, but one of the advantages of incumbency is there's a record by which you can judge people. But we had a neophyte here, we had Josh Newman, and he had no track record whatsoever. So another lesson I think to be taken by voters, they might roll the dice and take chances, but maybe that's a little too chancy to go with someone that has no prior experience, has no roots in the community.
And above all, the best indication we can get from these two incidents, number one, Josh Newman was recalled, right? And number two, the task, has to be on November ballot. That indicates some more, which is the part that we always say during the campaign, though, participation in U.S. politics, to participate, to be part of it, to exercise your right. In other words, to walk out to vote. That's the key point, am I right?
You are, and there's one other element to that too, is pay attention to the down ticket races. This was a gubernatorial primary. It's going to be a gubernatorial election here in November, but particularly in presidential years, people don't pay attention after the top of the ticket. They don't pay enough attention of what follows. And we really need to, because every day your city council members and mayors, your board of supervisors, other officials have sometimes a greater impact on your life than what's going on in Washington.
You're right.
So it's really important. Every position is potentially, and then people who get elected tend to move up the ladder. So if you want to nip in the bud, again, the idea of someone just starting from nothing and being state senator like Josh Newman, you got to pay attention to all those lesser races that are out there.
All right, very good point. Thank you very much for that statement.
Sure.
My dear friend, my lovely audience, California is our own backyard, it's our own state. California is doing better than previous, but we are still having a long way to go. For example, we are in a state of politics tilted too much to one side. I'm not saying which side is right or which side is wrong. Right. I'm always saying that when driving, you hold your steering wheels, well, you're moving a little left, a little right, a little left, a little right. So that is the right way to do. Politics is the same thing. If you are doing this, well, you're bumping yourself into somewhere I don't know, all right? I'm not a politician. I have no political background. And by the way, lots of people say, hey, Jack, why aren't you running for office? So I say, no, I'll never. That will be across my dead body. All right, God, I will never do that. Okay, all right. So let's take a short moment out. That said, I'm still interested in politics, so I'll be back. Hello, my dear friends, lovely audiences. Welcome back to the show. Like I said, California is our own state. It's like your own house. It's your own backyard, front yard, whatsoever. And it concerns about your house, your husband, your wife, your kids, whatsoever. So it is your own business you're talking about. It is your own cup of tea you're talking about. At the federal level, if they decided to sanction whichever country, well, it is important, but not as important as your pocket being robbed, being imposed with extra taxes, so on and so forth. Those are the things. This is what we're talking about. With me today is my good friend, former candidate for California Senate House, 29th seat, currently mayor of Fullerton, a beautiful city, to share his views. I suppose an election view, however, we turned that page over already. We're talking about what's left as a legacy by the former sitting senator, Josh Newman, and by his voting, and also the concept of adding tax on the taxpayers, right? So what's left after that is the whole section of the district, right? So they look at the map. There is a saying that the 29th district is a more problematic district than the rest of the 28, the rest of the other 40. So what's your take about that?
Well, I think every district has its challenges. The 28th is 29th district is extremely balanced. And that leads to a certain amount of challenge because you want to hear from constituents mostly with one voice, but there are a lot of different voices in the district. So trying to figure out what's the best policy that would serve the most people, I think that's really the key. And what that means so often, as in every government, the thing about government is it's a monopoly. And so it has its own strong will and its strong head about what it's going to do. There is no competition to keep government honest. So that's where we, the voters, the people, constituents, have to keep our own governments honest. We actually have to manage them. And this was a case where we managed Senator Newman. We managed him right out of his seat in the Senate because what he was doing was not what we wanted as far as performance. Right. You need to do that at every level, at city, at county, at state, because, again, that monopoly tends to feel its strength and do its own bidding as opposed to doing what we would have it do. And that's the challenge. I know as a council member, we have a city government administration that wants to feather its own nest so often and let that infrastructure go. And it's important that a majority of councils say no, that they reflect what the voters, the electorate needs. And it's an ongoing process, like you said. What's really exciting about Josh Newman being removed is this is the beginning now of many reforms to come ahead. And so we've just begun. It isn't like that's over. And that's why I like you stressing that and pointing out to people, this is a great opportunity now to build on this and to take back a lot of the operating control of our state of California.
Yeah. Right now, I say with the recall and with the tax being in question, which is going to be, well, being able to turn off anyway, my bad, and we're talking about momentum, right? using that momentum or taking advantage of the momentum, though, what else could we do to switch a little bit of the California culture of tilting too much to the left or to the right? I don't know, but tilt. Tilt is not a word. It's not a right word, right? So what can we do to grasp these momentum to move ahead, please?
Well, the other biggest problem at the state level, and really at all other government levels in California, is the unfunded pension liability problem. And we just had a decision with the U.S. Supreme Court, the Janus decision, which is going to allow for some change there. That decision says that public employee members of their union are not now required to provide dues that would be used for political purposes. Now it's at their individual discretion.
Even if they are not a member, right? They're paying.
Right, so now they're going to be able to withdraw or withhold money that really has financed the one side to the detriment of the other side. And like you said, it wouldn't matter which party was in power. If they start to abuse the public, you would need that balance.
Yes.
And so this is going to create a defunding over time of the more powerful side of the equation in California. So that'll create some balance and a little bit of tension, necessary tension.
All right, good. And of course, this balance thing is being realized by lots of people, especially at some higher ranking intellectuals. When we get together, I'm not talking about myself being an intellectual. I'm just a normal man. I'm talking about the smarter people, IQ higher than mine. When they come together, they talk about the fact that how we can balance the ideas from going one side too much, right? And one of my friends, I remember so sharply that he once recommended at a dinner table, saying that what if we make a law to allow 40 Republicans and the 40 Democrats on the Assembly House and the 20 with the Senate House. Do you think that's something just a crazy thought or something practical?
I think those kind of exercises are pretty good. Now, that I haven't heard proposed so much, but proportional representation I've heard proposed, because what we've had recently now with the open primary that was passed, again, I think voters were fooled about the effect of that. It eliminated all minor parties, pretty much. They have almost no sway whatsoever now. But in other foreign governments, they have proportional representation in a form of almost a parliamentarian type government. And,
which happens every day in Europe, right? Okay.
Right. Yeah. But the problem with just arbitrarily saying 40 Republicans, 40 Democrats is who chooses those, and are you really coming from the constituents, grassroots up, or are you imposing a top-down decision, a smoke-filled room decision over the people? And one thing I love about our democracy is how we treasure the average person out there. Every person has one vote, and that vote may tip the scales and make a difference, and they can send one of their own to represent them in whatever house is being represented. So I'm always wary of top-down approaches. I prefer more the bottom-up. I'm more of a populist in that way.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. They can still gerrymandering it to make the Republicans vote for Republicans, the Democrats vote for Democrats, right? Yeah. That's why they switch around the map. They put the block here, block there all the time for gerrymandering, which is quite common too.
That's
so
true.
I mean, my friend mean that to stop doing all those crazy things, just make it a law, say 40, 40, 20, 20, that's it. Even though they may cross vote sometimes, right?
And they would, yeah.
And well, at least we reduce the chance of going one side for too much. Like I said, you're going this way, going this way too much.
That's an interesting concept. I'd like to see and hear more of it. That sounds like interesting dinner discussion.
And probably I'll invite a friend who mentioned that here to you to talk about.
But see, what you're talking about too is the marketplace of ideas. And that's what's necessary right now. We know that California is in a potentially weakened state, and that there are a lot of things that just under the surface aren't the way they should be in the state.
Right.
People are losing confidence in California. They're moving away. Lots of people are. And the state is headed in a direction of really being, polar opposites of being those who can't afford a lot and those who are tremendously wealthy, really a very polarized set of constituents in the state. We need to find a middle ground there as well. And the way things that are trending right now with our current policies, that doesn't seem likely. So it is time for us to start talking about, and you know, the other big issue they're talking about on this ballot is the proposal to split California into 3 states.
Oh, 3, yes.
So these are other people who are doing brainstorming to try to say, how do you manage this massive state?
Not a bad thing, not a bad thing to do, right?
Yeah.
And probably, well, that will probably cure California, but they say it takes centuries to happen.
It would be difficult.
Lots of work.
Because even if we adopt it, it's going to require a supermajority in Congress to accept that. In effect, 2 new states into the union if you did that.
Yeah, and you were talking about 3 governors already, right?
Trying to find room for 2 more stars on that flag, right?
There are more seats to fight for, all right? There are more seats to fight for, and you're creating 2 more Senate houses and 2 more Assembly houses, right?
2 more governors, 4 more senators.
Sure. You're talking about lots of seats to fight for, right? Okay. Now, what we've been talking about has more been on the tax side or bill side, but to concept, right? Conceptually, California is tilting too much to one side too, and I was looking at one of this video clip of San Francisco, the gay lesbian nude parade.
Yeah.
I was so scared. I was so scared, man. I was so scared. All right. Of course, okay. So you're talking about equal freedom. You're talking about that part, but there are kids on the streets. There are women on the streets. There are kids on the street. There are other people on the streets. How about their freedom? So it looks at politically, we're doing that too. We're tilting to that direction too. How are we going to handle to help ourselves, save ourselves, sir?
Well, Sacramento or San Francisco, one of the great cities in the world, does resemble Sodom and Gomorrah these days in so many ways. And so much so that I have a nephew who was just married just recently and took his honeymoon in San Francisco. And my wife, who's a lifelong Californian, she was fearful for their safety. These kids from Indiana,
I believe she has a reason to worry about
right
that.
Now, isn't that awful though, that you have this beautiful, wonderful world capital city and have so many advantages, and they've trashed it. The leadership and the governance of San Francisco has been just miserable, right? And it seems at some point the people themselves there would recognize that and cast that off. And I'm hopeful that that'll happen. But it just shows you how much the wrong political leadership can take you in the wrong direction. Now, they can say that the locals there want it that way, but I can't believe that they want what they're dealing with now.
I don't go against the fact that they have their freedom, all right? They have their own right. If I decide to go naked, I go naked. If I want to wear something, I wear something. Okay, I have the freedom. But you have a societal issue to talk about, and you have a whole street to talk about. Okay, I wish you see that video. It looks like a river with a flood. It's a kind of like gushing into the street, and those people back off to the side, looking like lost. And there are kids there. There are small babies there. Right. So I don't think that, well, we should do that. Well, I don't think we should have gone that far.
Right. Even protecting children and the young, you can make a strong argument that those who are in control of what's going on in San Francisco, that they're guilty now of really neglecting their duties of maintaining public safety and public health and at least a certain amount of decency in the city.
Yes, exactly. We gave them everything already, the third bathroom, the legalization of same-sex marriage, so on and so forth. What else? Come on.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Right, we have a limit, we have bottom lines. Okay, by the way, And a disclaimer I have to make, whatever I say represent myself, a personal opinion of Jack Chow, a male, a husband, a father of two, of whatsoever. And it has nothing to do with this organization, with this show, with the GNE,
Right.
neither does it with the EDI, all right? Okay, with me, my good friend Bruce Whitaker, Mayor of Fullerton. We had some good time chatting about California, its politics, its money, its everything. And most importantly, the coming November, please keep in mind to exercise your right of democracy to make sure that extra tax, well, gets overturned. So thank you for watching, my dear friend. We're over time, but it's worth our while. Thank you, sir, for sharing.
Thanks, Jack. Appreciate it.